Welcome to KetoMealsAndRecipes.com. Today's recipe is my Chinese beef and cabbage stir fry, a keto one-pot meal that you can make in just 20 minutes. I think that you will like this really easy stir fry recipe because it's both budget friendly and a meal you can enjoy anytime because it's so quick to make. And a bonus point is it's a healthier version of a Chinese stir fry. And my family has said they prefer it to the takeout because they can have it nice and hot and they know that it's healthier for them. The thing that I like best about this stir fry is that it takes very little prep and it's a filling, comforting, full, quick meal. And I can put it together so that we can have a homemade meal even on the most busy days, either weekdays or when we're busy on the weekends. The macronutrient ratio for this Chinese beef and cabbage stir fry is 2:1, with 11.7 grams of total carbs, 4.4 grams of dietary fiber, resulting in only 7.3 grams of net carbs per very generous serving that even my guys find filling. Although this recipe is based on an authentic Chinese recipe from one of my cookbooks, I have switched up some of the ingredients so that they're easier to find in regular grocery stores and you don't have to buy them at a specialty grocery store, which also adds to the simplicity of this recipe. Even though I have substituted a couple of the ingredients, I was always mindful to keep the authentic Chinese flavor throughout the stir fry, while at the same time also making this recipe sugar-free, gluten-free, low-carb and keto, of course. Because you're making a stir fry and things go very quickly, you should prepare all of your ingredients ahead of time. To get things started, I begin by first making the stir fry sauce. For this sauce, all you have to do is combine all the ingredients in a small bowl to which you add your tamari. I would highly recommend that when you're buying tamari, which is available in most grocery stores, look at the label and make sure that the tamari is sugar-free. That's very important. Next, I pour in the toasted sesame seed oil. I don't know about you, but I just really love the smell of the sesame seed oil. Next, I'm adding my Frank's Red Hot Sauce. Here I'm substituting for a very sugary Asian hot sauce. In my opinion, it serves the same function and you get the same flavor. As with most Asian recipes, you have to balance the hot and savory flavors with the sweet. And my preferred sweetener that I usually use is an erythritol monk fruit blend, which I always grind to a fine confectioner powder because it blends in better. After you've added all the ingredients together, then just stir well to combine all the ingredients and set the bowl aside because you'll be using the sauce near the end of the stir fry process. By setting it aside, it also gives time for all the flavors to develop and blend. Now it's time to do the prep of the vegetables, and I'll begin by chopping up my carrots. If you're having a young fresh carrot, all you have to do is wash it really well. Otherwise, just scrape off the skin. Then cut the carrot at sharp diagonals, but do make sure that all the wedges are the same thickness. After you've cut up the entire carrot, then take one of the wedges and cut it lengthwise into thin matchsticks like this. However, you can simplify this step if you prefer by getting a box grater and grating your carrot on the largest holes of the box grater. This will work well too. Now it's time for the bell pepper. Although you can use any color bell pepper, for this recipe I prefer both the taste and the color of the yellow bell pepper, or capsicum. There's many ways to deal with cutting up a bell pepper, but one thing I like to do is to cut large sections in between each of the seams of the bell pepper. Then I take a piece of the yellow bell pepper, turn it skin side down, and begin to cut my even, thin julienne pieces. Again, try to make all the pieces as even as possible, and repeat until you've cut up the entire bell pepper. Now it's time to deal with the onion. First, peel off the skin from the onion, and then cut it in half through the root. Then cut the onion into thin ribbons starting from the opposite end of the root. In this recipe, I prefer to use a yellow or a white onion, but you could also use a spring onion, whichever one you prefer. As part of my prep, you will also need some garlic and ginger, and how I prepare it is I peel it, and then I use the second smallest holes on my box grater and grate first the garlic, and then I also do the same for the ginger. If you haven't used ginger very much before, here's a little tip. Take a small teaspoon and just scrape the skin off. That's the easiest way to remove it. And after grating the ginger, you may find that there's some juice on the cutting board. Scoop that up and use it because it has tremendous flavor. Now it's time to prepare the cabbage. In this recipe, I prefer Savoy cabbage, also known as Chinese cabbage, but if this isn't easily available for you, or you prefer, you can use a regular white round cabbage. Both types of cabbage will work very well in this recipe. So today I began by using a small Savoy cabbage, which I cut in half lengthwise. Then I begin by cutting at the tip where the softer leaves are and going down towards the root end. I want to explain that because the softer tip ends will wilt faster, I cut them a little bit thicker, and then the rest of it, from about a third down, I cut all the same width. I would also like to mention that when I'm cutting, I go as far down the length of the Savoy cabbage as close to the root area as I can. You'll find that that whiter area is really nice and crunchy, especially after it's been stir-fried. Once I've cut this half of my cabbage, it usually measures to about 6 slightly compressed full cups. With the leftover other half, place it in your fridge and save it for another recipe. Now that I have completed all of my prep, it's time to begin the stir fry. I first place my flat bottom wok onto my stove top, which I have set to medium heat. Once the wok itself is hot, I add my cooking oil. In this case, I'm using refined coconut oil because I don't want any additional taste of the coconut, and the refined coconut oil has a good smoke point when I'm using higher heat. And then I add my ground beef, and as you're adding the beef into the wok, break it apart so you don't get big clumps. Now leave the meat alone for a minute or two until it browns on the underside, and then use your spatula to flip the meat over and also cook that side till it's nice and brown. Now I'm going to add the salt and the pepper, the grated ginger and the grated garlic. Once I've added them, then toss very well to integrate the salt, pepper, and ginger garlic with the meat. A good way to do this is to scoop from the bottom and flip to the top. And as you're flipping the meat, also use your spatula to break up any large clumps of meat. You really don't want big clumps. And then continue cooking for about 5 more minutes. Now your meat should be completely brown, so make a clearing in the center of the pot. Drop in your carrot sticks and let them cook for about 1 minute. Now it's time to drop in the onion slices and your julienne bell pepper. Leave everything alone and cook for about a minute. This will help soften the vegetables that are in the center of your pot. Then use your spatula to toss and combine the vegetables with the meat mixture. It's now time to add the cabbage strips on top of the meat mixture. You may think, wow, this is a lot of cabbage. But don't worry, it will shrink. Leave everything alone for 1 or 2 minutes and then start tossing again from the bottom, flipping towards the top. This way it'll help to incorporate the cabbage very nicely with all the rest of the meat and vegetables. And you'll see that the cabbage is starting to wilt and the volume is decreasing. When you have noticed that the quantity of your cabbage has decreased, you have about half the volume of cabbage as you did before. And when your cabbage has started to cooking and is wilting, it's time to get your prepared sauce, give it a good stir, and then pour it over everything. How much longer you cook everything will depend on your personal preference. We like our vegetables to be a bit crispy or al dente, so I continue cooking until the white parts of the Savoy cabbage are fork tender but still very crispy. But if you prefer your cabbage softer, cook for 1 or 2 more minutes. Then as soon as you find that the cabbage is at the doneness that you prefer, immediately transfer all the stir-fried meat and vegetables into a cool serving dish. By doing this, you're going to stop the cooking process and preventing the vegetables from overcooking. And now your dinner is completely done. This is all there is to this comforting, very flavorful Chinese-inspired recipe. And as my family says, they think it's healthier and better than takeout. As with all of my videos, the link for the printable, formatted, and translatable recipe is posted in the description box, so please go check it out. I hope that you have found this recipe to be of interest to you and that you might want to make for yourself and your family. I'd also like to thank you for taking the time to watch my video, and I hope that you come back next time when I post my new one. Until then, I wish you and all your loved ones a very happy and healthy day. Cheers!